What is up, guys? It is Gnarly, back with another video. This is something I haven't done in a long time, an unscripted podcast episode, but today I am here with Larrue, aka Keith, aka Tensei Trivia, and probably a bunch of other things that I can't name off the top of my head.
Hey, what's up? It's me, Larrue.
So, yeah, for those of you that don't remember or weren't around that long, Keith was one of the first podcasters we got for the Heretic Mansion, but then he kind of went off to do his own thing. But anyway, we're here today to talk about the recent controversy that has exploded in the Megaton / Persona / Atlus community about Catherine Fullbody. So
yeah, I would even say that it went even beyond that, because I've seen people who don't even know anything about the franchise talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is without doubt the biggest controversy for anything Atlus related I've ever seen. Well, I mean, there was Rule of Rose, but the thing about Rule of Rose, that wasn't a game they made, that was just a game they published. Like, this is Atlus's own product. So my experience with the controversy was, last night I was at a party playing Super Smash Brothers, so I didn't get back to my dorm until about 2. Then before I went to bed, I opened up Facebook, and I saw that a bunch of people I knew from SMT Network were posting stuff like, fuck Atlus, why would Atlus do this? And then I'm just like, you know what, I'll just worry more about this when I get up in the morning. So then I got up in the morning, and I just saw that both my Facebook and Twitter feeds were exploding with all this controversy about Catherine Fullbody and just politics and stuff like that.
And yeah, oof. And the way that I came across it is, I was just going to post one of my happy little Tensei posts that I do on Twitter, and I just happened to see that nearly everybody was saying exactly what you said. They're all just saying, like, down with Atlus. That's all.
Hashino should retire, boycott Catherine.
Ooh. Yes.
And the worst part is that Atlus USA has nothing to do with this. Like, you want to blame someone, blame Atlus Japan. Atlus USA doesn't make the games. They just bring them stateside. Yeah,
that's how they started. They were essentially just a localization group. They weren't even called Atlus USA initially. Now they still essentially do the same thing that they've been doing, except, you know, they have a foothold in the community. And I think that people are getting really confused with their role.
Exactly. So at first I was confused about what all this was over. After doing a bit of research, I traced it back to a forum post on a website called ResetEra, calling Catherine Fullbody transphobic for one of the new endings of the game. Basically, what the ending does is, it's kind of weird. It's like Catherine goes back in time because Vincent tells her he wishes they had met differently. So she goes back to Vincent when he's in high school. Basically, they start dating, then they eventually get married. Catherine marries Paul, or like at their wedding party or something, Toby is with Erica. Before she transitioned to be a female, she's not a female, she's a male. And because this is supposedly the happy ending where everyone's lives are better, people are freaking out because they see that as transphobia. At least that's what the forum said.
Yeah, and like, there's a lot, I guess, to go over with that, because there's so much context that people are like missing and kind of glossing over. But one thing that I do want to start off with is ResetEra is a site or forum that's kind of notorious. It's not famous, it's infamous for the negative impact they have on the gaming community, I would say.
Yeah, I did a bit of background research on them, and I found out that they've been known for censoring people that disagree with them, like blacklisting people for dumb reasons. In fact, they even have a list of games that you can't talk about on their forums, like, at all. You can't even discuss them.
Yep. And they're trying to add Catherine to that list, actually.
Yeah. I mean, the forum post that I read, it's just like, it's basically just what I've been seeing on Twitter, just people saying, fuck Atlus. Atlus has been doing this since Persona 4, which we'll get to later. But because of it, it's spread to other parts of the internet, and as you know, people are losing their shit over it. But they really don't need to be. This is all being overblown, and I feel like people are overreacting.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with you. I do want to kind of preface our argument with a statement that this is not us defending Atlus 100%. This is not us saying that everybody whose opinion is different is wrong or anything. This is really our take based on our research. And I think me and you have slightly different opinions, but they're similar enough, I think.
Right. But yeah, so basically, like as Keith said, it seems like with the ResetEra forums, they're intentionally trying to blow this up. Why? I don't know. I guess they just don't like Atlus, and I guess they enjoy causing controversy or something. But like I said earlier, it seems like this has been taken out of context, because the thing about the ending that most people haven't really bothered to look up is that there have been a lot of things that suggest that it's not being transphobic. A lot of things that would lead you to believe that it's not. This ending isn't transphobic. We don't know when this ending takes place. We know that C. Catherine went back in time to date Vincent starting in high school. We don't really know what time period this takes place in. It could just be before Erica gets her gender-changing surgery. And another quote that wasn't mentioned in the forums is that when Erica is with Toby and, you know, everyone's married, he expresses jealousy, and then Erica says, she says something like, you'll get a girl soon enough, which leads me to believe that Eric right now actually is planning on getting the gender-swapping surgery and being with Toby, because it was Toby that actually slept with Erica and lost his virginity to her in the original game.
Yeah, and in that particular ending, it's doing that really bad soft sci-fi time travel, and that really just means that initially Toby doesn't meet her till much later, but in this version, he meets her in high school.
Right. Because the thing about in the original Catherine is, like, all the other members of the cast there at the bar, they're all in their early 30s. Toby is only 23.
So I guess the big thing to keep in mind is that this is all secondary information. We're getting information that's being nitpicked by people at ResetEra who are known for kind of putting a slant on their information. We haven't gotten any screenshots of this or any like straight up text, because even if it was just screenshots of the Japanese text, then someone else can translate it. One thing that I saw is that the specific text regarding the explanation of the ending, saying that this is the happy ending, it can be translated to say that this is the happy ending for everyone, but it also could be translated to say that this is the happy ending for Vincent. Right. So if it's a happy ending for Vincent, then whatever happens to Erica wouldn't necessarily be relevant, because the whole point of it would have been for him to live happily ever after with Catherine, meeting under circumstances that were nicer. And like you were saying earlier, we don't know the time, like the timeline, because it's different. Because she's met him earlier. It also seems like Toby meets Erica earlier, or Eric at the in that scene. Yeah. We don't know when or if they're planning the gender reassignment, but the dialogue between Toby and Eric imply that it will happen eventually.
Exactly. Like, again, this is a perfect example of everything wrong with the Bob mentality, because people didn't really bother to do any research. They just saw this forum post, and then they took it to the internet. They took the mob mentality that Atlus should be boycotted, Hashino should retire. They have an anti-transgender agenda, when that's not the case. We don't know for sure that that's not the case, but based on the information we're getting, it seems like that's not the case.
Yeah, and another thing to consider that's, I think, really important to remember about this game is that people keep blaming, but he's not even directing this game, he's just producing it, which is a completely different role, and that just kind of allows him to dictate big things in the game, more or less. It's producing doesn't mean that you have your hand in it completely at all times, because if that were the case, then movies wouldn't be the producer would be the same as the director, because that's what people are kind of implying with his role.
Exactly. I mean, and another thing is, like, going back to talking about ResetEra, they actually made another forum post when we were discussing what we were going to do for this video that it basically says that it's basically pointing to a list of things that could be taken as homophobic or transphobic from Persona games. Like, the two biggest examples are Kanji and Naoto. When the thing about Naoto is, you know, Naoto's passion is doing detective work. However, most of the people in the detective industry and most of the detectives that she looks up to are men. So Naoto is afraid that if she's not a man, that people aren't going to take her seriously. So that's why in her dungeon she wants to get the gender reassignment surgery so that people can take her more seriously as a detective. But towards the end of the game, she realizes that she doesn't need to be a man to be a good detective.
Yeah, and to strengthen that point, during, I believe it's either the interview or it's in one of the art books, Sojima specifically says that they were, when designing Naoto and also Kanji, they made them to basically contradict the anime tropes. And for Naoto's anime trope, it was the prince detective or the detective prince, which, you know, every single Hoshino Persona game has.
Right.
And Naoto is the one for this one. And, you know, making prince female is the contradiction. And the whole point of it was to make a commentary on female expectations, or what is accepted of females, in the same way that Kanji liking to sew and stuff, or his commentary on what it means to be a man, which is why he ends up doing all the things he does. It's not that he's gay or bisexual or bi-curious. Like, none of that is relevant to his character arc, and no official Atlus statement has ever agreed to this particularly Western standpoint in regards to these two characters.
Right.
They're just for sure commentary on gender norms. They're not meant to be, this person is literally trans and this person is literally bisexual. That's you getting rid of all the subtext and all the evidence and every single thing they say and do in the game, and just focusing on that one character trait or one specific thing, you know?
Right. And that's another thing. It's like, Atlus games aren't made for Western audiences. They don't think about Western audiences at all when making them. They just bring them stateside because a bunch of people in the West like us happen to enjoy them. But it's not really something that they consider when making the game. I mean, Keith, you told me about that blog that you came across that was talking about it, that Japanese blog.
Yeah, so it was for like a trivia post. I decided not to post it because it was controversial. And when I've posted about gender, it's always controversial.
Exactly.
So in this blog, it was a lesbian blog, or a lesbian themed blog. The blogger was lesbian, and she was basically talking about how she doesn't understand why people are upset about Catherine, and particularly Erica. This is before Full Body came out. She was just saying that she was really blown away by people thinking that it's offensive, because in her mind, that's just Japanese humor. And whether or not that's good or bad, that's up to, you know, people. That's up to someone else to decide. But when someone who is part of the LGBT community in Japan, living in Japan, fan of the franchise, says that it's not meant to be offensive, I think that that's then our job to either take them at their word, or maybe reassess what constitutes of like offensive behavior. When it's intentional, I could see it being offensive. You know what I mean?
Right.
But when the intention is to be funny, and you know you don't think it's funny, that doesn't mean that they're homophobic or something. That just means that the joke was not funny to you.
Exactly. But this actually brings me to another thing. Another thing that people are up in arms about is Ren's portrayal in the game. So basically, I'm going to be going into major spoilers territory. So, Keith, have you been spoiled on Ren?
Funny enough, as soon as I saw this whole drama, I was basically spoiled on everything. And I tried to block keywords to protect myself, but too late. I know everything now.
Yeah,
so.
I sure feel sorry for anyone that was trying to avoid spoilers.
Yeah, but you were saying...
But, okay, so So when the Catherine Full Body trailer released back at the end of 2017, everyone was speculating because they thought, based on Vincent's reaction, which is actually going to be the picture that I use for this video, but when they saw Vincent's reaction, they all thought it was because Ren was a trans or a futa, or like whatever you call them. So before the game came out, it was actually leaked that Ren is not a human, she's an alien, and in her alien form, she looks like a pink minion sort of thing. So then everyone thought that, okay, well then I guess the big revelation wasn't that she has male genitals, but then it turns out that she actually does. And there's a scene after the part where Vincent freaks out, where Ren is trying to comfort him, but what people have been saying is that Vincent hits Ren, but he doesn't actually assault her, he just kind of knocks her hand out of the way when she's reaching for him. And then Ren gets upset and runs out, and then the rest of this arc is basically Vincent trying to make up for what he did to Ren.
And, I think there's a couple ways to view this. If you want to be offended, you could see that as he's attacking a woman or a transgender or whatever. But then the other perspective is that that's a pretty classic anime scene where someone tries to comfort someone and then they slap their hand away and, then they realize that doing that was a mistake while the person's leaving. That happens in so many anime that, like, I don't understand how in this particular instance it's being read as being some sort of, like, transphobic thing.
Right. But, I mean, again, like, even if it was, the whole point of the arc afterwards is Vincent trying to make up for what he did to Ren. At least that's what I've been told, but the forum posts only go so far as to say that Vincent hits Ren because she's a trans, which they're completely leaving out the rest of that part, which leads me to believe that that's what this arc is about.
Yeah, and in general, I would consider that a lie by omission, because what you're doing is just leaving out key things that would completely change how it's interpreted, and I think that's a disservice, especially in a game like this where it could potentially be a very positive game. People want to be outraged so bad that they're creating this false narrative.
Right, and the thing people seem to be forgetting is that just because a writer of a story puts something in a story, that doesn't mean he necessarily agrees with it or likes seeing it.
Yeah, just because there's an unlikable character or a likable character trait doesn't necessarily mean that the writer has these character traits too. A good example of that is Yosuke and how people were upset that he's more or less homophobic because he's afraid of being alone with Kanji after, Kanji's dungeon, which, if I'm honest, I think that if, you're a teenager, your friend had a weird thing where, you might be guessing his sexuality, you might be a little nervous to be alone with him because you're not comfortable with your sexuality because you're a teenager, right? I think that's, not everyone should have that reaction, and it's not the best reaction, but this is 2008,
Exactly. It was more than 10 years ago.
And I remember, sorry to cut you off, I remember what it was like being, a teenager. I was like 18 or 19 at that point. I remember what it was like being in school at that point, and if you were even slightly effeminate, people would assume that you're a gay. If you took care of your face, or you styled your hair nicely, people would just call you gay. It was something that people were afraid of, Yeah,
so I was in middle school at the time. It was the same thing.
So it's like, I don't understand why people were saying. I saw this on the subreddit, actually. People were saying that they should never even had that as a scene because it was unnecessary and it just painted the character in a bad light. But I think that what it did was it kind of made the character more realistic, and if anything, it portrayed reality, because not everyone is going to have a positive interaction with something they're not comfortable with.
Yeah, and what I was going to say was, the original Catherine came out in 2011, which back then, that thing that you were talking about was still going on. However, most of the articles that I've read calling Catherine transphobic or homophobic or whatever have been written within the past 3 years.
Yeah, and hindsight's always going to be 2020. We could look back at, I don't know if you know the movie Breakfast at Tiffany's, but there's that character played by Mickey Rooney who's supposed to be Chinese, and he's wearing yellow face. We can go back and say that was offensive now, but at the time it was acceptable because people love Breakfast at Tiffany's, and they will gloss over the fact that that was kind of racially insensitive for him to play a Chinese stereotype, but while being a Caucasian actor. You know, it's weird that people will often forget the context in which media is created in order to fit whatever they want to argue about.
Right. And what I'm worried about is, like, in the fallout of all this controversy, we haven't gotten a statement from Atlus yet, but what I'm worried about is that when Atlus brings the game stateside, they're going to either take parts of it out or change parts of the story so that people don't get upset.
And, you know, that's kind of what I think is going to happen, because ResetEra they were one of the driving forces behind a lot of the censorship and changes made to Fire Emblem Fates. I don't know if you knew. So to me, I think that they're going to probably make a lot of changes, because, you know, this is the difference between localization and then just a straightforward translation. Because if you translate it completely straightforward, some stuff gets lost. But then if you localize it, it makes it easier to understand, or it makes it more palatable. So right. I don't know which one's going to be better, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, well, because that's kind of what Atlus does when they localize games. They don't just straight up translate it. They leave in as many of the stuff from the original script as possible, but there are some things you have to change so that North American audiences will understand it. But they've never gone the length of actually, like, changing the story. At least not in the last 20 years, like they did it with Persona 1.
Yeah, and I want for them to kind of keep it the way it originally is, but if I'm honest, this is not a story that I'm overly invested in, especially now that I know everything or more or less the big reveals, because people were insistent on spoiling it.
Yeah.
To friends, I only follow close people on Twitter, and everyone decided to just do the spoiler dance. So
yeah, and
I'm not. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, like, for these new endings and, like, overall the new content, like, just politics and transphobia and homophobia and all that aside, what do you think of the new endings?
I think it's interesting. One of the criticisms I heard initially before the game came out was that it didn't really add or change much, but this is like a big step, because more or less Catherine was like the ultimate wish fulfillment game. It didn't really do anything in terms of, like, improving any of the characters. You play a selfish character. So Vincent, I think, is one of the most selfish, worst characters that Atlus has ever created, and yet you have to play as him. And in this game, or at least this new endings, I think it's exciting that not only is Vincent trying to improve, but then the people around him are improving. And it's weird that people are just glossing over those changes, because one of the things that happens in the original Catherine is that all the characters make fun of Toby all the time for dating Erica, and, you know, they basically just keep bashing him for dating with, like, a man, essentially. But in this version, they actually do get rid of a lot of that dialogue. In particular, there's a scene where Erica talks about wanting to be a female wrestler, and then they say that she can't because she's a man. Well, she still makes that statement, but in this version, they just don't have it. So they definitely make changes that will be more palatable to, like, modern day audiences.
Yeah.
I think it's weird that people will just ignore all of the positive changes and just focus on something that could potentially just be something lost in translation.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of ironic that they're trying to take out the stuff that could be seen as transphobic, and people are calling it even more transphobic than the original game.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the change?
Well, personally, I'm not a big fan of that ending that I was talking about. Like, I don't like when time travel is used as a plot device, because and the thing about the chaos ending in the original Catherine, it was like, you know, Vincent knows that Catherine is a succubus, but he still wants to be with her. So then he, like, goes into hell and becomes an incubus and all that. But in this new ending, like, Catherine goes back in time, starts dating Vincent when he's in high school, but he's still dating a succubus, yet he doesn't really know it. But it seems like he's still gonna kind of, like, live a normal life with her. So, like, I don't understand how this is going to work.
It's definitely, well, I guess not really an argument, it's more of a generalized statement. I just think that in general, Hoshino games, Persona 3, 4, 5, there's a lot of parts where you have to just ignore logic. Less so in 3, but in Persona 4 and 5 especially, you just have to ignore a lot of logic. This game, especially this new version, it's way more of that. And yes, I'm with you. Time travel is a horrible device to use in anything, especially when it's soft science fiction, because then it's even worse. They explain the random changes as like butterfly effect, and I don't like that because that's just so lazy.
I know. And again, in the original game, we don't really know much about the characters' lives when they were in high school, but now, like, they're changing the story so that part of the game's story goes back to a time that we are not all that familiar with, and it seems to me just like one of those utopian endings, and I really don't like that Megaton is starting to do that. Like, you know, Apocalypse did it, Strange Journey Redux did it, now Catherine is doing it.
Don't get me started on Redux. I can take up a whole, like, I can take up a long time talking about the things I don't like in that game, but I do think that it's just like a thing that's happening. I think that's partly just happening because that's today's modern audience, especially in Japan, because they're only making these games for Japan. They just want a happy ending. I've seen, especially with like Strange Journey Redux, I've seen complaints about the new endings for the Japanese audiences. Saw that with Apocalypse as well. I haven't gotten to see much of the stuff they have to say about this game, but I'd imagine there's gonna be more of that because Catherine in a lot of ways reminded me of Nocturne, how like most of the endings were still kind of dark regardless of what you do.
Right, and that's what made Megaton great. Like, there's no black and white alignment system. There's every action you do is going to have a consequence. There's no perfect ending. But it seems that they're trying to change that.
Yeah, it's pandering, to be honest.
I mean, hell, even with 4, with its neutral ending, like, it was clear that the writers wanted you to favor neutral over the other two endings. Because it just seemed like they completely ignored a lot of the fundamental problems with neutrality as an alignment that were present in the other games. But if I talk about that, I'm going to be here all day.
I mean, at the end of the day, do you think that this reaction people had was like valid?
No, I don't. I think there's no reason that it should have exploded in the way it did. If people had just done their research, none of this would have needed to happen. Yeah,
I 100% agree. There's definitely a level of like perception that you could have where you can say that something like, you could say Alice is transphobic, I guess, but that's really just not understanding that, for, like I said, Persona 3, 4, and 5 don't have the best writing. They're not Academy Award-winning scripts, to be honest.
Exactly.
And they're all supposed to be pandering, wish fulfillment games. Like, I think that it's weird that people complained about for instance, the two gay guys in Persona 5. They're saying how they like creep on you and they come off very slimy, and apparently that's a stereotype that gay guys like hit on you hardcore, which I've never ever heard, by the way. And I live in one of the cities with one of the largest gay populations in America, and I've never heard of the stereotype that gay guys hit on you incessantly. Anyway, sorry, weird digression. But point is, in that game, there's that, right? But you could also have your relationship with, what's her name, Kawakami, and in every single Persona game directed by Hoshino, you could date an older woman who by all intents should not be with you because that's illegal and she's manipulating you. She's, what is that called, the ebiphile, where they're older and they're going after like a teenager. Like, it's weird that that's okay. The people aren't criticizing that, but they're all jumping on this one random instance where if you change that gay couple to a woman, I bet you no one would have said anything. Because why? Because that's happened in a lot of Persona games. And
it happened in Persona 4 with what's her name, Kashiwagi.
Yeah, and in Persona 3, it's the Innocent Sin MMO girl.
Oh, yeah, that's Toriumi.
Yeah, so it's weird. It's a weird thing where you can just nitpick which things offend you, and ultimately, I think that people have the right to be offended, and they have the right to not buy the game. But let's not rile up a mob by ignoring all the facts and just picking the things that you can use to make your argument strong. And also, let's not fall into the tendency to just believe whatever we read, because I'm actually writing a video about this, because you know the Strange Journey SMT4 thing. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Everyone just keeps repeating this information that Strange Journey was originally going to be SMT4, but with a simple like Google search, Strange Journey interview, one of the first things that pops up is Eiji Ishida, who's the director, straight up saying that it was never meant to be SMT4. So, and yet people keep like perpetuating this. If you could just all do me and and Nyarly the favor of just Googling something, maybe just type in Shin Megami Tensei interview if you're trying to find information, you'll find that almost all the information is pretty easy to verify and fact check. Right now, this whole Catherine issue is hard because people are making these statements. No one is providing screenshots, which is the weirdest thing to me when you're making an argument, to omit the one thing that would verify your claim, you know?
Yeah. And the worst part of all of this is that because of this controversy, there's a chance that Catherine Fullbody is only going to be remembered for this. People aren't going to remember it because of its gameplay or its story. They're just going to remember it as the game that caused an uproar because it was supposedly transphobic.
And worst of all, it's already bad enough that it's coming out way later for us. It's bad enough that's not coming out for the Vita for us. But now we have this controversy, and that's going to hurt the sales for the West. At least I hope it doesn't, but I think it will. And it's just unfortunate because isn't it better to kind of make your own opinion based on your experience as opposed to what you've read other people say about something?
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't think it's going to impact sales because in the past with games like Grand Theft Auto, we've seen that controversy brings awareness to more people and it makes more people want to buy it. But the thing about most controversial games is that they're not really remembered for their quality, they're remembered for controversy.
Yeah, like I remember, was it San Andreas that was banned in Australia? I think it was on that one.
Yeah, because of like those hidden sex motions in the files.
Yeah, and it's funny because I played San Andreas and that's the only thing I remember is that and the hot coffee mod.
Yeah, and San Andreas is a great game.
How do we close this off?
Yeah, that's a good idea. So that's our opinion on this whole controversy. Just hopefully more people view this video and that it brings more information to light. But anyways, guys, thank you guys for watching. Be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more SMT content, and I will see you later.